The city lights of Chicago shimmered against the night rain as Daniel Carter sat alone in his office, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. The clock on the wall struck midnight, echoing through the room like a countdown to heartbreak. His phone buzzed again, another message from his wife, Melissa. "Sign the divorce papers, Daniel. It's over." He stared at the text for a long moment, the words blurring through his tired eyes. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building a life together, raising their son, Ethan, all crumbling to dust in a few cold sentences. Outside the window, the storm raged, mirroring the chaos inside him. He rubbed his face with trembling hands. The company they built together had become their battlefield, their love poisoned by greed and betrayal. But what hurt more was not losing the business, it was losing her. Melissa hadn't always been this way. She was once his biggest cheerleader, the woman who'd wait tables beside him while he dreamed of owning a restaurant chain. She was ambitious, sharp, and fiery, but over time, ambition turned into hunger, and love turned into leverage. That night, Daniel drove home through the storm, headlights slicing through the rain. When he stepped inside, the house felt hollow. The laughter that once filled it, now replaced by silence. Melissa stood in the living room, arms crossed, suitcased by the door. "So you finally came home," she said coldly. "Did you sign them?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Melissa, can we please talk about this? We've built too much to throw it all away." "Built?" she scoffed. "You built your empire, Daniel. You never built a life for us." "That's not true, don't," she snapped. "I'm done living in your shadow. Steve understands my worth. You never did." At the mention of his best friend's name, Daniel froze. "Steve." She looked away, guilty silence confirming what words couldn't. Daniel's voice cracked. "You're leaving me for him?" Melissa picked up her suitcase and smirked. "He appreciates me. Something you forgot how to do." Daniel clenched his fists, trying to hold himself together. "And Ethan? What about our son?" She paused by the door. "He's better off with you. I have to think about myself now." And with that, she walked out into the storm. Daniel stood there for what felt like an eternity. The woman he once loved more than life itself had just walked out, and somehow, he wasn't angry, just broken. A few moments later, a small voice broke the silence. "Dad." Daniel turned. Ethan, just 15, stood at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is Mum gone?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, buddy, she's gone." Ethan came down the stairs, his face pale with confusion. "But why? Did you fight again?" Daniel knelt and pulled him close. "Sometimes people change, son. Sometimes love isn't enough." The boy stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I hate her for hurting you." Daniel hugged him tighter. "No, don't hate her, son. Just remember what love should never become." The next morning, Daniel found the divorce papers neatly placed on his desk. He stared at the bold black letters, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," and felt an ache deep in his chest. Later that week, at the courthouse, Melissa arrived looking flawless, like she hadn't lost a wink of sleep. Steve was with her, holding her hand. The betrayal burned, but Daniel stayed composed. When the judge asked if he was ready to sign, Daniel glanced once at Melissa. Her eyes were cold, calculating, victorious. Without a word, he signed the papers and pushed them forward. She smirked. "Finally, learning how to let go, huh?" He smiled faintly. "Be careful what you wish for, Melissa." But just as the judge was about to move forward with the formalities, he opened a sealed envelope that had arrived that morning. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "this letter appears to be from your late father's estate. It seems to involve a conditional inheritance related to your marriage." Melissa blinked, frowning. Daniel looked confused too. Didn't know there was anything left. The judge continued, "It states that in the event of a divorce, the spouse who remains faithful to the marriage and does not commit infidelity shall inherit full ownership of Carter Enterprises, valued at over $80 million. The courtroom went silent. Melissa's face drained of color. The judge looked up. And based on submitted evidence, Mrs. Carter, that's not you. Melissa's lips trembled. What? That's absurd. He's lying, but the judge raised a hand. We have signed affidavits, photographs, and messages confirming your relationship with Mr. Steve Bryant. Daniel sat still, watching the color vanish from her face. For the first time, she looked small, the mask cracking under the weight of truth. The judge closed the folder. Ownership of Carter Enterprises will remain with Mr. Daniel Carter. The court will proceed to finalize the divorce with amended terms. Melissa turned to Daniel, fury and disbelief mixing in her voice. You knew? Daniel's expression was calm, but sorrowful. I didn't, but maybe my father did. The gavel struck dart as Melissa stormed out. Ethan watched from the back of the courtroom. He had come quietly, against his father's wishes, just to see how it all ended. When his mother passed him by, she didn't even look at him. He whispered under his breath. 6 words that changed everything. Dad. She set you up. And in that moment, Daniel finally understood, this wasn't just betrayal. It was a warning. Rain poured outside Daniel's house as the echoes of the courtroom still haunted his mind. He sat in the darkened living room, his hand wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, staring at the empty couch where Melissa used to sit. Ethan entered quietly, his presence gentle but heavy with concern. Dad, Ethan said softly, sitting beside him, you okay? Daniel forced a small smile. I've been better, son. Ethan hesitated, then asked, what did you mean when you said maybe Grandpa knew? Daniel sighed deeply. My father was a sharp man, Ethan. He always told me, when people love you for your money, they'll leave you poor. But when they love you for who you are, you'll never be alone, I guess. He saw something in Melissa long before I did. Ethan leaned back, thinking, she wasn't always like that, was she? No, Daniel whispered. There was a time she cared. But somewhere along the way, greed got the best of her. The two sat in silence for a while, the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Then Ethan's voice broke the quiet again. Dad, you should see what I found. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. Before the court hearing, I checked Mum's email. I know I shouldn't have, but I had a bad feeling. She wasn't just divorcing you, she was planning to transfer all company shares to Steve once she got control. Daniel blinked, processing the words. What are you saying? She set you up, Dad. She and Steve planned everything to make you look unfit so she could get the business, the assets, everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. She wanted to destroy me. Ethan nodded grimly. Yeah, but Grandpa's will saved you. Daniel put his head in his hands, the truth hitting hard. I spent years trying to make her happy, and all she ever wanted was more. Ethan looked at his father, seeing something he hadn't seen in years. Sadness, but also the faint spark of strength. Dad, Ethan said quietly, she took enough from us. Don't let her take your piece too. Daniel smiled faintly, pulling his son into a hug. You're wise beyond your years, kid. Your grandpa would be proud of you. As days passed, Daniel tried to pick up the pieces, but rumors spread. Melissa had filed an appeal claiming the will was fraudulent. The local news picked up the story, turning it into a public spectacle. Restaurant mogul's wife, exposed for infidelity and fraud. The scandal hit hard. Customers whispered, employees stared, and Daniel's reputation was dragged through headlines. But instead of hiding, Daniel faced it head-on. He showed up at work every day, talked to his team, and refused to let shame define him. One afternoon, while reviewing paperwork at his office, he received a call from his lawyer. Daniel, you might want to sit down for this. The appeal's been dropped. Dropped? Daniel asked, confused. Yes, apparently, Steve confessed. He told the court Melissa coerced him into forging evidence and threatening to blackmail you. He even turned over proof. Daniel leaned back, stunned. So, it's over. For now, yes. But Melissa's reputation is destroyed. She's facing charges. Daniel ended the call and stared out the window. The city glowed under the sunset, a new day dawning after the storm. A few days later, Ethan came running into the living room. Dad, "You're not going to believe this, Mum's on TV." Daniel turned on the screen. There she was, Melissa, standing outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. She looked pale, desperate, her once perfect composure shattered. "Mr. Bryant's confession is false," she shouted, tears streaking her makeup. "Daniel manipulated everyone, he's the real liar." But the public had already turned. Comments flooded social media, calling her out, labeling her the greedy wife who lost it all. Daniel watched quietly, no satisfaction in his eyes, just sorrow. "It didn't have to be this way," he murmured. Ethan frowned. "She's still blaming you." "I know," Daniel said softly. "But sometimes people would rather drown than admit they're the ones who sank the ship." That night, Daniel found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a note in Melissa's handwriting. "You think you've won, but you'll regret it. You and your precious son ruined everything." Daniel folded the note without anger, placing it in a drawer. He didn't plan to respond. Some battles, he realized, were fought best with silence. Weeks passed, the media storm faded, but the wounds lingered. Daniel focused on rebuilding not just his company, but his relationship with Ethan. They spent weekends cooking together, sharing laughter that had long been missing from their home. One Sunday morning, while cleaning the garage, Ethan found an old box labeled Dad's Memories. Inside were photos of Daniel and Melissa from their early years to young dreamers. Happy and hopeful, Ethan held up one picture. "She did love you once, didn't she?" Daniel took the photo, smiling faintly. "Yeah. But love built on conditions isn't love, son. It's a contract waiting to expire." As the father and son stood surrounded by the past, they didn't know fate was about to turn one last page, because Melissa wasn't done yet. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across Daniel's study. He sipped his coffee, reviewing quarterly reports, when his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert. Melissa Bryant attempts corporate takeover, shares plummet amid scandal. Daniel frowned. He hadn't expected her to move so quickly. Even with her reputation tarnished, she still had allies, people willing to gamble on her cunning. Ethan walked in, holding a tablet. "Dad, you need to see this." On the screen, Melissa was giving a press conference. Her face, composed. But her words, sharp. "I will fight to reclaim what is mine. Daniel Bryant may have deceived the court, but the truth will come out." Daniel rubbed his temples. He knew her words were designed to create fear and uncertainty. "She's desperate," he murmured. "Desperate people are dangerous." Ethan frowned. "Should we do something?" Daniel shook his head. "No. We stay calm. Reacting to her gives her power. Remember what Grandpa said, control your own ship, don't fight storms you can't navigate." The next few days were tense. Daniel's legal team worked tirelessly to secure the company's shares, while Melissa's attempts faltered, her schemes unraveling one by one. Despite the tension, Daniel noticed a subtle change in the office atmosphere. Employees, who had whispered about the scandal, began returning to their usual dedication. Inspired by Daniel's resilience, one afternoon, Daniel received an unexpected visitor, a middle-aged woman named Claire, a former employee of Melissa's family business. She had proof that Melissa had manipulated financial statements for years, using shell companies to hide assets. "You need to see this," Claire insisted, handing Daniel a thick folder. She was planning to bankrupt your company from the inside, while maintaining her facade of innocence. Daniel scanned the documents, disbelief and anger mingling in his chest. This could destroy her credibility entirely. "Exactly," Claire said. "But be careful. She's smart, and she'll fight dirty." Daniel nodded. "I don't need revenge. I need the truth to stand on its own." Meanwhile, Ethan had been digging through old files, trying to understand the full extent of Melissa's plan. "Dad, look at this," he called. On the screen were emails between Melissa and her lawyer discussing a hidden clause in Daniel's father's will. A clause she thought could give her leverage. Daniel's eyes narrowed. She underestimated us. Grandpa wasn't just clever, he anticipated greed, betrayal, and even cunning attempts like hers. The tension built as the court date approached for the final hearing. The courthouse was packed, journalists and cameras capturing every move. Daniel and Ethan arrived, calm but resolute. Melissa entered separately, exuding confidence, unaware of the evidence Daniel now held. When the judge called the session to order, Melissa began her statement, attempting to sway the court with eloquence and charm. But Daniel's lawyer stood, presenting the concrete proof. Claire's documents, Ethan's findings, and Steve's confession from the previous case. Melissa's composure began to crack. Her voice faltered, her confident posture faltering under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The judge leaned forward, reviewing the documents carefully. "It appears," he said slowly, "that Ms. Bryant's claims are not only unsupported but contradicted by overwhelming evidence. Mr. Bryant's control of his company and estate remains legally and rightfully his." Gasps filled the room. Melissa's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Daniel watched quietly, the anger and pain from months ago softening into relief. Ethan gripped his hand tightly. "We did it, Dad." Daniel smiled faintly, a sense of closure washing over him. "No, son. Grandpa did it. We just followed his guidance." As the courtroom emptied, Melissa was escorted out, humiliated and powerless. The public's perception had shifted irrevocably. News headlines praised Daniel's integrity and Ethan's sharp intuition, labeling the father-son duo as symbols of resilience and justice. Outside the courthouse, Ethan turned to his father. "You okay, Dad?" Daniel took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. "Better than I've been in years. You know, sometimes life doesn't just test you, it shows you who's truly by your side." Ethan nodded, understanding more than words could express. Together, they walked to the car, leaving behind not just the courthouse, but months of betrayal, heartache, and uncertainty. And yet, Daniel knew that life's real test wasn't over. It was about rebuilding trust, healing, and embracing the future they'd fought so hard to protect. The morning after the courtroom victory, Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds, feeling a rare sense of peace. The weight of Melissa's schemes had been lifted, but he knew healing wasn't instant. Over the years, betrayal had left deep scars, not just on him, but on the people who had quietly stood by him, like Ethan. Ethan bounded into the room, eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, look. The press is calling us heroes. They're saying we exposed corruption, but you were calm the whole time." Daniel smiled faintly, sipping his coffee. "It's not about being a hero. It's about doing what's right, no matter how hard it is. Integrity matters more than public applause." Later that afternoon, Daniel received a visit from Claire, the former employee who had provided the evidence. She handed him a folder filled with additional financial disclosures and emails that fully documented Melissa's intent to manipulate the estate and company. "Dad, this confirms everything. There's no way she can make a comeback," Ethan said. Daniel nodded, flipping through the documents. "She underestimated foresight, planning, and honesty. My father made sure justice wasn't just blind, but thorough." As the day progressed, Daniel returned to his office to address his employees, many of whom had waited anxiously to see the outcome. He stood before them, letting the relief and gratitude in their eyes sink in. "I want to thank each of you," he said, voice steady but warm. "Your dedication and belief in fairness made a difference. Today, we've proven that integrity, patience, and courage always win over deception." Applause filled the room. Daniel's heart swelled, knowing this was more than a victory in court. It was a triumph of moral strength. That evening, as Daniel and Ethan walked through their favorite park, they reflected on everything that had transpired. The sunlight glinted off the autumn leaves, painting the world with warmth and hope. "Dad, do you think she ever admits she was wrong?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Some people never admit the truth. But we don't need them to. What matters is what we do, how we carry ourselves, and the legacy we uphold." Ethan glanced at his father, admiration shining in his eyes. "I'm glad I was here to help." I learned so much from you. Daniel placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You learned more than that, son. You learned to stand firm, to trust in honesty, and to protect what matters most. That's a lesson most people spend a lifetime discovering. Days turned into weeks, and the media attention gradually faded. Life returned to a calmer rhythm. Daniel began mentoring young entrepreneurs, emphasizing ethics over shortcuts, while Ethan pursued his studies with renewed purpose, inspired by the resilience he had witnessed firsthand. Then one quiet evening, Daniel received a letter from his late father's law firm, a personal note confirming that the will had safeguarded not just the company, but the family's values and assets, anticipating the very challenges Daniel had faced. Reading the words, Daniel felt a deep connection to his father. Grandpa's wisdom had guided them, even from beyond the grave. A sense of closure washed over him, mingling with gratitude for the son who had been his unwavering support. As night fell, Daniel looked out over the city skyline, reflecting on the journey. Betrayal, schemes, and deception had tested him, but they had also revealed the people worth trusting, the power of patience, and the enduring strength of integrity. Ethan joined him, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. To us, Dad. To standing strong, together. Daniel accepted the mug, raising it with a gentle smile. To us, and to doing what's right, always. In that quiet moment, father and son stood united, not just in victory, but in the values that had guided them through hardship. Life had tested them in ways few could understand, but it had also shown them that justice, truth, and love, even in their simplest forms, endure. The next morning, as the city awoke beneath a pale golden sky, Daniel drafted a letter to his employees and stakeholders, reminding them that integrity, diligence, and kindness were the cornerstones of lasting success. Today, we've witnessed that life doesn't always follow a straight path, he wrote. It tests us, challenges us, and sometimes hurts us, but the choices we make, the courage, honesty, and love we put into the world, define not just our legacy, but the lives we touch. He paused, letting the words resonate, before sealing the letter. A sense of purpose filled him, stronger than any relief or satisfaction. In the end, Daniel realized that the most powerful victories aren't the ones fought in courtrooms or headlines, but the quiet triumphs of character, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. As he and Ethan walked back into the house, laughter and conversation filling the rooms, Daniel knew this chapter of their lives had ended, not with vengeance, but with understanding, respect, and hope for the future. And somewhere in the stillness, he felt his father's presence, a reminder that wisdom, foresight, and love always endure, guiding the ones willing to listen. The story closes with the reflection: true strength isn't measured by power or wealth, but by integrity, courage, and the love we show in the face of adversity.